Hello, thank you for joining me for my oral presentation for my technical writing class at Reading Area Community College. My name is Laurel Henchman and I'm doing my oral presentation on my feasibility study. This was about St. Clair Recycling. I made a PowerPoint to go along with this, so you should be looking at the first slide, which says St. Clair Recycling, with my name underneath. And we can move right along to the second slide. This is a list of all the key points that we will go over during this presentation. So let's briefly go through each of these things we're going to discuss and we'll move along from there. The introduction. The purpose of my feasibility study was whether or not to expand the St. Clair recycling location, and the problem was that it's too small. Litter and pollution are scattering the park, and it is a youth baseball field there too, so there's a lot of children present. Neighboring communities use this site is another point we're going to talk about. The next point is mandated state and community laws, which are put in place for these recycling areas. The next thing we'll talk about is the funding for the expansion, where that would come from. The EPA is the Environmental Protection Agency, and they handle all of that recycling stuff. Is it cost effective for the community? We'll go over that. Borough approval. And right off the bat, I will tell you that after doing the study, I did find it feasible. And so at that point, we will discuss the recommendations that I came up with because of that feasibility. And after that, we will have the conclusion. So let's move right along. Please go to slide 3. And what you're looking at here is the Franklin Street Park in St. Clair. This is an actual picture of the bins set in place for the recycling location. And I want to point out a few different things in this picture. If you look to your left, you'll see a wooded area. They have trails there, picnic tables, pavilions, things you'd find in the park. And directly behind the bins is the parking lot for the entire park. And if you see a flagpole in the background and there's a fence that surrounds that, that's actually the youth baseball field. And so there's a lot of youth there from the St. Clair Elementary School that use this site. Also keep in mind that this is a brand new picture of this when it was first installed back in 1996. So nothing has been put in this yet. This was taken right after installation, before it's ever been used, and this is not how it normally looks. With excess use, those platforms in front in the photograph there, those will have garbage bags, boxes of glass, plastic, all kinds of recyclables scattered about. And that's not good. Wild animals from the nearby wooded area can get into things, scattering it even more, and just plain wind blowing it around the park, making it look dirty and disgusting and unsanitary for kids to be playing around. So let's move on to the next slide. We're going to look at the increased recycling in tons. Now this is a really interesting graph, and I don't need you to so much pay attention to the numbers as just the way the graph is going. The bar charts started out so small and they increased over 5 times the amount in tons in a 12-year period. This is from 1994 to 2006. But you can see that there's been a consistent increase in recycled goods over the years. So that's an important fact to keep in mind, that this suggests to us that there's going to be a continued increase. So let's go on to the next slide, which is slide number 5. Okay, this is a map of Schuylkill County, and this shows all of the townships inside the county. And if you look directly in the center of the map at number 15, it's highlighted in green. That is St. Clair. All the other numbers, there are 28 recycling drop-off locations in the entire county. St. Clair is number 15. And what I want you to focus on in this map is look directly above and to the left and even to the right where they do have a recycling location at number 17, but it's a little farther away. All of those neighboring areas, they don't have a recycling location of their own, and so they're probably more apt to use the St. Clair drop-off point for their goods. For the most part, because it's the closest. So distance is a big factor of why they would use that site. It's more convenient. So this should just give you a general idea of where we are on the map. So let's move on. You should be on slide number 6 now. And what this is the distance of neighboring townships, but I narrowed it down a little bit. That green dot in the center of the map with the number 15, that's the actual location of those bins that we looked at in that first picture. That's the park right there. And what I wanted you to look at in this map is the neighboring townships, how close they are that surround St. Clair. They're really not that far away. So this map is more to show that there really is such a small distance between these towns that they would be more apt to use that location. And keep in mind that those neighboring townships do not have a location themselves. So let's go on to the next slide, which is slide number 7. Okay, Pennsylvania Laws Act 101. This is really interesting. Since the program started in 1994, that is because Act 101 mandated all larger municipalities to have a recycling program put in place. Now keep in mind those neighboring areas around St. Clair, they were small enough to get out of having to meet those requirements. In this act, St. Clair was small enough to just put in the one recycling location and not have to do curbside pickup, where you would put out the green bin on the side of the road and they would actually pick it up from your home. So St. Clair did meet the requirements, but they met them minimally with this small drop-off location. And also referring back to that other chart we looked at with the increase in tons recycled over the years, keep in mind it was really low at the beginning. So they probably implemented such a small area because that was all there was a need for. But obviously the need has increased over the years, and this is why we're talking about expanding it. The bottom point on this slide, the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, which works with Pennsylvania Act 101, they will fund an expansion, they'll fund maintenance, they'll fund any renovations for any recycling areas. So their grants actually would cover the costs for this. On top of that, I think it's really noteworthy to mention that the costs go back in the consumer's pockets. For instance, the more that's recycled, the less waste you're putting out on your curbside for trash pickup, thus lowering your trash bill. So that's a really positive thing for the community. And not to mention, it cleans up our parks. Let's go on to the next slide, which is slide number 8, borough approval. St. Clair is a borough, and since their mandated laws are met, you have to go through a process to get this expansion done. You would have to submit paperwork to the borough requesting them to actually go out there and inspect the area and see that there is a problem that there's some concern for. Next, you would have to also submit a form for a request for a public hearing. And what this is, they actually advertise that there's going to be a township meeting in the local newspaper. So the public is aware that they have the option to come to these township meetings and weigh out the pros and cons. The township meetings are held publicly once a month, and everyone in the community is welcome to be involved, weigh out their opinions, and the issue is discussed and they make a decision based on these meetings. So it's a really important thing. Now, before we go to the next slide, I'd like to mention all of the pros we've talked about. You might ask, well, why hasn't it been expanded yet? Let's go to the next slide. The parking lot. The Franklin Street Park parking lot. This is actually a photograph behind the bins, and that is the whole parking area. Now, many of you are probably aware of parking wars in every community. So, upon doing my feasibility study, I talked with several members of the community, and all of them were for expansion of the recycling bins, except the con of it possibly taking away from parking space. So, weighing out the pros and cons, as you can see to the right of the screen too on that PowerPoint, right next to the recycle bins over there, there is a car parked there. You can kind of see the difference in space it would make to just put a few extra bins in. It would be very minimal loss in parking. There's still a very wide parking range here. It would probably be the loss of a car or two. So weighing out the options, I felt it would be worth the loss of a parking space to have a cleaner park. I'm sure many other people agree to that. I'd rather have one less parking space than a filthy park. So, that was my only con that I came up with. Let's go to slide number 10. Since I already discussed with you that I did find this feasible, we'll go over what my recommendations were. I recommended to submit the forms to the borough for a public hearing and for a request for them to go and inspect it. Another thing that I gathered was petitions for the park, because since there was still that con about parking issues, and that is a rather big issue for a lot of people, the best thing to do is to go around and actually get supportive petitions to actually present at the public hearing. So that's a positive thing to have with you. The next thing is to actually attend the hearing, be present, bring your feasibility study, bring your petition with names who are supportive of this, and talk to members of the community. Encourage them to show up to this public hearing and back you up on getting this expansion passed. At the end of this slide, I have repeat the process if your request is denied. If all else fails, you have the option of repeating the process, resubmitting the forms, having another public hearing held, and go through everything all over again. The pro of this is you're bringing awareness to it. More people are going to see this in the paper, that this issue is going to the town hall, and more people are going to know what it's about and start paying attention to what's going on in the park. You know, people are going to look at that and say, well, yeah, there is a need to get that litter cleaned up. It would be feasible to have a bigger area, and more people are going to be aware of what's going on, and hopefully more people attending the hearing in proposition of it. So let's go to number 11. We have reached our conclusion. Let's talk about what we just went over. We went over what the problem was and whether or not it was feasible to expand the park's recycling location. We went over the litter and the pollution that's scattered about the park and how neighboring townships are contributing to this. And those are townships who don't have a recycling location of their own. We went over that state grants will cover the cost for this, and that it actually puts money back in the consumer pockets, that this is of no cost to the community. This is all covered, so the financial aspect, which would be very important, is not a concern here. So that's a really good point. Minimal space will be altered upon expansion. If this were to go through, we looked at photographs of that car in the corner, that it would only be about a parking space or two that would be of a loss, and we made it feasible because we would much rather have a safe and sanitary clean park than an extra parking space. So due to that one con, this is a feasible case here. So the option to repeat the process, even if we fail at our first request, we have the option to go through this as many times as we want until we see some positive changes. So that's a really good thing to know. And lastly, we'll conclude to enjoy a cleaner park. And I encourage everybody to get involved with your community. No matter what town that you live in or what county you live in, the Environmental Protection Agency is there to help you clean up your community and to enjoy your parks and recreation. So I encourage you to be supportive of that and take advantage of that and enjoy your town. Thank you so much for sharing this presentation with me.